tuned into the 2-Minute Warning, a live stream community conversation pertaining to social and political issues and how we can collectively resolve them. Powered by the Westside Gazette.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the 2-Minute Warning. The 2-Minute Warning is brought to you by the Westside Gazette newspaper, Broward County's oldest Black family-owned newspaper that has been serving the South Florida community and the state of Florida since 1971. I'm happy to finally have all of the crew back together again. It's been a while, and happy to have my good friend, the publisher of the Westside Gazette, Mr. Bobby Henry, and our faithful sidekick, Mr. David Wright. Brothers, how are you doing?
Since this is a special edition, I won't use my same slogan. I'll just tell you, man, voting is my black job.
I hear you.
That's all of it. That's all of us, y'all. Absolutely, man. And not only voting is our black job, but it's what we have to do as support for those that can't vote.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. So, man, Bobby, you've been traveling the continental United States. Tell me, what's been going on in your journeys, man?
Well, Perry and David, again, to be caught up in this spirit of this entire election season has been an eye-opener. I just got back from D.C. with the Congressional Black Caucus, and to be a part of that energy and that message, it really resonates. But there's one thing that I want to tell the listening and viewing audience is this: we cannot get caught up on just preaching to the choir. And I'm saying our usual suspects when it comes to voting, our churchgoers, our fraternities, our lodges, our temples, those are expected places for us to be. Mm-hmm. We got to come home, man, and go back to the highways and the byways and get to those brothers and sisters, nieces, nephews, cousins that are out there under the tree, that are homeless, that are just lost. We have to get to them, to get them, to re-engage them and allow them to believe that the system does work for them as well. Mm-hmm. So that is what I have been involved in, Perry, across this, my junkets across this country and the different places that I found myself in, is that let us not forget the least, the left out, the lonely, and the disenfranchised.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. David.
Well, I'm in total agreement with my brother saying, and also, I can just reflect back in my younger years. And you know how we always say, if my older self could tell my younger self a little something, give myself a little wisdom, what would I do? And I'm speaking to those brothers out there, those younger brothers that are maybe under 40, that are, as I would call it, what I was doing was kind of rolling the dice. Time out for that. We got to look at this really seriously, not just playing games with it, but look at it really seriously and look at the projection of how this can affect us moving forward for generations to come. And I would say we should be talking more to our younger brothers. We should be talking more to people that we normally wouldn't have a conversation with. Mm-hmm. With all due respect, hearing them out and then sharing some of that knowledge and wisdom that we have.
Yeah. And it's I can say this too, Perry. It was enlightening to see that there were a whole lot of young folk at the CBC engaged in conversation, wanting to hear, wanting to talk, as well as those who were disenfranchised. And their sentiments or their conversation was, why don't anybody talk to me? where's the message that pertains to me? And I'm speaking mostly from the Democratic side. I don't know what was happening over in the Republican Party side. I can only speak from the Democratic side. So that was the sentiments and the conversations that I was engaged in.
Yeah. I and give my perspective, and I guess we can just lead right into our guest for tonight, because I agree wholeheartedly with all that both of you say about our ability to reach out, our ability to come out of our comfort zones, uh, and our ability to be echoes of a message that we know resonates with people. We just need them to, as the Apostle Paul says, we need them to mix it with faith. So we got to give them something to mix with. And so I guess, as we approach the show, Bobby, this show harkens me back to 2020 when we had the same palpitations in our hearts, the same outlook that was hopeful, but yet grounded with a little worry. We find ourselves back here in 2024, despite all of the positives that has come out of the current administration. With the nomination of Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, I do have to admit that the excitement that is somewhat similar to what we experienced in 2008 and 2012 is starting to see some of that. But the landscape has changed.
Oh yeah.
Landscape has changed a lot since 2008 and 2012. And our guest tonight, and our show tonight, to give you a brief glimpse of what tonight is. Our show tonight is for people who I consider kind of like myself. I'm very involved in voting. I'm interested. I participate. My volunteerism seems a little different, and I'll be really honest with you on this. I'm not a good volunteer when it comes to registering people to vote. I'm not a good. I guess I could, and I'm pretty sure I could, knock on doors, call, text people, but that's not my forte. And it seems that in our ramp up to voting, especially within the Black community, primarily within Democrats, but specifically within the African American community, our volunteer energies are buffaloed into voting. We push people to the polls. It is not a mistake to say that these elections are on the backs of African Americans and minorities, primarily African Americans, because we are that ignition that pushes. But we're in a different time, and I believe there are more opportunities for people to participate in this process beyond voting, beyond registering, beyond knocking on doors. Our elections are at a point where the confidence in our electorate is dwindling. And it's not that the workers, it's not that the election itself is any different. It's just the external forces. And as I say, when we have an election as divisive as we are dealing with right now you add another added pressure to those election workers who are working diligently and who are on the front line of much of what we will hear about later in news accounts and news articles. We'll hear about them. And so, what is it that we, the public, can do to participate in this election process beyond what is the stated norms, and what is our comfort level? And so, our guest tonight is no stranger to the show. She was one of our first guests when we kicked off the show in 2020. And her commitment has only gotten stronger. Her involvement and her reach has only gotten broader. Emily Levy, the founder of Scrutineers, a nonprofit group that brings communities together around the issue of voting and the issue of transparency and understanding in our voting. And I'm glad to invite her again to have us lead us into this worthwhile discussion of how we can get involved in voting in our elections beyond voting and beyond the registration and get out the vote activities. And believe me, there are quite a few options for us to grab hold to. And so, without further delay, as we said we were going to do 7, we went a few minutes over. I want to introduce Miss Emily Levy, the founder and president of Scrutineers. And Emily, so glad to have you. I'll let you introduce yourself and your team. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Perry and Bobby and David, so much for having us on tonight. We're going to be sharing a presentation that we put together about, just as you said, other ways that people can get involved in this election, keep making it as transparent and fair and secure as possible, including some things folks probably don't know yet that is possible for those of us to do. So I want to introduce my dear colleague, Nyla, who is our volunteer coordinator at Scrutineers, and she's going to lead off the presentation for us tonight.
Good evening.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good evening.
Very well, thank you.
Doing well.
Thank you for having us today. Are we ready to get started?
Sure.
you go
And
ahead?
yeah, before we get started, to our audience, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, please type in your comments as we go through the presentation. We will be monitoring for your questions. If you need Emily or Nala to repeat something, please put it in the chat so that we can have them repeat it. But we want them to make it through the presentation and then leave time for some Q&A at the end. So if you just, if you're like me and you can't hold that thought because you're old and you might lose it, go ahead and put it in there. We're going to hold it for you. But if it's something that you need Emily and Nala to repeat, please put it in. We'll break in to have them repeat it. Also, just a forewarning, we are going to go over tonight. We got some information that you need, and you need to take some time out. After tonight, please invite your friends to watch the recording either on Facebook or YouTube to go back and see. If you can't remember something, pass someone that link to have them come back and look. But these are things that I know that you can do in your community and in your home. That's the good part. So without further delay, Emily, Nala, the show is yours.
Thank you
Okay,
so
let's
much. Thank you so much for having us here today. As I said, my name is Nyla, and I'm here with the Scrutineers Executive Director, Emily Levy. And we are here to speak a little bit about what we're doing with Scrutineers. So we're calling tonight's presentation "When Voting Isn't Enough, What the Current Risk to Democracy Calls Each of Us to Do." And I think you'll see why in a moment. So as Emily mentioned before, I'm the volunteer coordinator for Scrutineers. And for those of you who haven't heard of us, Scrutineers is a nonpartisan online community working for a transparent and secure election so that every voice is heard. And
So it looks
our
like
mission—
we don't have our slides yet. Excuse me for interrupting.
Oh, sorry about that.
Let's see if we can get the slides up and catch up to where we
Sure.
are. So could you go back, Lynn, to the title slide first? We've got a volunteer here, Lynn from Scrutineers, who is doing the slides for us. And this platform is new to us that we're broadcasting from. There we go. There we go. Thank you.
We got it.
Now we're ready for the next slide, and then that will catch us up.
Awesome. So while they're getting that together, as I was saying before, for those of you who haven't heard of us, Scrutineers' mission is to educate, train, and mobilize nonpartisan election volunteers, activists, and advocates. And we work to ensure that all voters can vote, and most importantly, that all the votes are counted accurately in order to increase voter confidence and achieve and sustain a thriving democracy in the US, which sounds like a really big and lofty goal, but we're really doing our best, and we're really glad to be in community with folks like this particular show to get that done. So we teach the public and our members specific actions that you can take in your community, including a lot of opportunities that you can do right from the comfort of your own home. And we help make sure that the candidates with the most votes are actually declared the winners and represent the needs and desires of the people. So I'll pass it to you, Emily.
As a national organization, we are fairly small. We're about 4.5 years old, and we currently have over 1,000 members plus 9 member organizations. Our members range in age from 14 to over 80. And we work with groups all over the country. We're a partner of Election Protection, the Declaration for American Democracy, Coalition, the State Voices Florida, and Power the Polls. And we also work with all kinds of other organizations, including some you may have heard of, Center for Common Ground, the Voting Rights Alliance. And we're entirely remote, and we have an interactive membership website where our members learn and connect with each other and can take action together.
Thank you, Emily. And we'll tell you a little bit more about our organization a bit later in our presentation, but just to get us started and get us kicked off, you might be wondering as you're watching this, am I in the right place? So let's do a little test. You're certainly in the right place if you care about US democracy and you're concerned about threats to US democracy. So if that describes you, you are absolutely in the right place. You are also in the right place if you are looking for ways to help protect this year's election and democracy itself. Even if you are unhappy with what is on the ballot or unhappy with your candidate choices even, you're in the right place if you care about the institution of democracy in and of itself. And you are 100% absolutely in the right place and in very good company if you have doubts about whether or not US elections are fair, but you don't want to be associated with extremists. And we all know who I'm talking about. So even if you don't personally have the right to vote, if you fall into a category of folks who are disenfranchised from the vote, if these things matter to you, you're 100% in the right place and you are 100% welcome at Scrutineers. So a little bit about myself. I've been a grassroots organizer since I was 14 years old, and I've worked across a variety of issue areas and movements, primarily food justice, racial justice, and gender justice. And now I'm here as the volunteer coordinator at Scrutineers, and I will let Emily kind of give you a little bit of her background as well.
As Nyla said, I'm Emily Levy, and I'm the founder and executive director of Scrutineers. And like Nyla, I've been an activist since I was a child. I think I went to my first protest at age 5, and I did my first organizing when I was in 3rd grade, which was a petition drive for girls to be allowed to wear pants to school. And I got involved with the movement for fair, secure, and transparent elections in the aftermath of the 2004 election. That was the year that George W. Bush was trying for a second term, and the Democratic presidential candidate was John Kerry. The election came down to Ohio. You may remember this. Those of you who are old enough, whichever way Ohio's electoral votes went was the way the national election would go. There were a lot of irregularities that started surfacing shortly after the election, and I ended up coordinating the most in-depth statistical investigation into what happened in Ohio on a precinct level. And through that project, I learned a ton about how elections work, and that got me started on a journey that has continued now for nearly 20 years. I then founded Scrutineers in January 2020 to fill some gaps that I saw in the election protection movement and, frankly, in the progressive movement as a whole. I saw people who cared deeply about the environment, about human rights, about racism, and all sorts of other crucial issues, but weren't taking action. And over, I would hear people say, I want to do something to make a difference, but I don't know what I could do that would matter. So have you ever felt like that? I know so many people have. Well, many of us did know what folks could do that would matter, and we were trying to do it, and we didn't have enough help. So I started Scrutineers in part to bring those two groups of people together, the people who want to help and don't know how, and the people who know what needs to be done and need more help. And we pride ourselves at Scrutineers in being able to provide a variety of ways people can get involved in training people when necessary, so that they know how to do the things that we encourage them to do. So I want to answer a question now that I'm guessing some of you have or had before this slide was showing, which is, what is a scrutineer? It's actually a word you can find in the dictionary. A scrutineer is a person who scrutinizes an election or makes certain that the counting has been done correctly. And in many English-speaking countries, though not in the US, it's an official position. It's often a partisan position, which is in contrast to us, because scrutineers.org is a nonpartisan organization.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And I want to take a moment to also honor all the ways that people are involved in our elections. So whether your only involvement up until this point has been as a voter, or whether you're also registering voters, helping people get IDs, rides to the polls, being a poll worker, any kind of get out the vote work, or maybe working in an election office, or even been a candidate or a campaign volunteer, I want to say thank you. Thank you for all of your work. Even those folks who are writing postcards and doing phone and text baking, which is a lot of work. We see you and we really do appreciate you for doing that. So thank you. And also today, I'm thinking about how the history of our elections and how the history has affected different people and different groups of people. We are all here, and we know as a whole that our elections have never been perfect for everyone. And there's a long history and context of different people and different groups having a very strenuous relationship with our elections, especially Black people fighting for the right to vote, and that right still being in jeopardy even today. Thinking about voter suppression, women fighting for the right to vote, all of those things. So at Scrutineers, we recognize that we're part of a longer and very diverse lineage of people who've been working toward election justice, and we would love for you to join us. And focusing on election protection specifically is our way of doing that and continuing that lineage.
As Nyla mentioned, we call this presentation "When Voting Isn't Enough," what the current risk to democracy calls each of us to do. And this year especially, voting is absolutely not enough. It's a vote plus year. We each need to vote if we're able, and also do more.
So even if you're already volunteering on a campaign or helping to get out the vote or working as a poll worker, we have some new and meaningful ways that you can get involved in defending democracy itself. So some of these activities happen in between the time that voting ends and the time that the elections are certified, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And you might wonder why we want to talk now about stuff that won't happen until after the election. But it's because the folks who are willing to take this kind of action will mostly be too busy right around the election to get the information and the training that they'll need. So congratulations to you all for starting your journey right now. So as you may know, there are some wonderful organizations that are already doing a lot of great work on a ton of different election problems, like voter suppression and dark money and gerrymandering, redrawing districts so that candidates choose voters instead of the other way around. And a lot of people are doing work on disinformation that's now being supercharged by AI. We strongly support those organizations that do that kind of work. We're in coalition with many of them. And so because of that, we don't want to duplicate or complete their work. They're doing it absolutely wonderfully. And those aren't the only issues with our elections as well. So the issues that we focus on might be a little bit less familiar to you.
We focus on educating people about the very real problems with our elections while combating disinformation about made-up problems. So another way of saying that is that we work to protect the elections themselves and to collect evidence that may be needed to protect against made-up stories about stolen elections, which we think we're very likely to see again this year. Democracies, of course, rely on elections. Take a look at this quote from the Declaration of Independence on the next slide. Can we have that slide? So you might recognize the beginning of this quote. The end is what I want to focus on, and that's a little less commonly quoted. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, because it was written a long time ago, are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And elections are the way that we give that consent. So if we're going to keep and hopefully strengthen our democracy, it's absolutely crucial that we have reliable, accurate elections.
Exactly. So this year, it's going to take all of us working together to preserve our democracy. And yes, we do have a democracy, even though it is far from perfect. And we're here to make it a little bit more perfect if we can. So we've mentioned the need for transparent elections a few times already, and you might be wondering what we mean by transparent. So in our context, a transparent election is one where all parts of the process are publicly visible in a way that we are all able to be sure that the election itself is fair and accurate. So that's what we mean when we say transparency.
We do this work as a nonpartisan organization, as we've mentioned. And although certainly many of our members belong to political parties and most of us have very strong opinions about who we want to win, those just simply don't belong in this work. But I want to talk a little bit about that. In this moment where everything is so divided along partisan lines, why is it important to do nonpartisan work? We really believe that what's at stake here is bigger than the candidates, bigger than the personalities and political beliefs, that it's actually about protecting our rights to express those beliefs in the first place, now and into the future. Focusing on the candidates alone distracts from the dangers that our elections are in and that our democracy is in. Fair, secure, accessible, and transparent elections shouldn't be a partisan issue. Frankly, it shouldn't be an issue at all. We should be able to just count on that, but sadly, we can't. So we really believe that working in a nonpartisan way helps counter the current tendency to politicize the election process itself, such as with targeted disenfranchisement that tries to stop people in traditionally and historically marginalized communities from voting. Nonpartisan volunteers can help lower the temperature when people get themselves wound up. This work, frankly, has gotten a lot more difficult in the last few years because there have been so many lies told about our elections. Chief among them, the big lie about the 2020 presidential election. Some of the lies have been mixed in with some truth, which makes it, frankly, more confusing. Specifically, the systems that we use to count our votes actually cannot totally be trusted, at least not in the way that they're being used now. And it's sometimes really difficult for us to talk about this piece, about not trusting the systems that are used to count our votes without having people think that we're part of the MAGA movement. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's really painful to me that people mistake me for that because I feel like I'm the opposite. We do agree with them that elections aren't always fair. We do agree with them that there are problems with the voting systems, and we differ from them and diverge from their position in that we believe in operating on data and documentation and science. And we work to back up everything we do with evidence. So a number of our projects are involved with collecting evidence to use in case it's needed to defend against false accusations of fraud. So I want to talk a little bit about those voting systems that I said we don't totally trust to count our votes accurately, specifically the computers we use to count and sometimes even mark our ballots. These systems are across the board not secure and they're not transparent. Basically, it's as if our votes are being counted by the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. And this is something that concerns me greatly and that I've been working on, like I said, for almost 20 years. For a long time, we were working to get rid of those electronic voting systems. And at this point, I would say it looks like they're here to stay. If this nation is going to continue to trust computers to count its votes, we absolutely need to have extremely robust methods of verifying the vote counts that those computers produce. Not all computerized voting systems are created equal. In the scrutineers community, we actually have a training the recording of which is in our library, about the differences between the types of voting systems that are in use and kind of what the vulnerabilities are for each one. And then we encourage people to advocate for when new voting systems are being purchased in their area, to advocate for the less awful ones to be purchased. Right now, the US does not have robust enough systems for verifying the vote counts. The checks and balances that should ensure accurate results in our elections are not good enough. We're going to need legislation to change this, but in the meantime, public oversight by people like us is the main tool we have to strengthen these processes. So you can kind of think of it as crowdsourcing election verification. The two main checks and balances on the system are audits and recounts, and I want to speak a little bit about each one. When I say audits, I'm not talking about what we call the fraudit that was conducted by the cyber ninjas in Arizona after the 2020 election, which some of you may be familiar with. In most states, it's actually required that elections be audited, yet almost across the board, those audits are insufficient. It's only the vote counts that are audited. The procedures aren't audited. So for example, there is an auditing of the chain of custody of the ballots and other voting materials as they move from the polling places to the central count location, and then through that location or from drop boxes to the election offices. So we really believe that the procedures need to be audited as well as the vote counts. And even the vote counts aren't audited thoroughly enough. They tend not to be audited for every race in every place. Officials will select randomly or supposedly randomly. The randomization is very, very important. Certain precincts to audit or certain races, depending on state law. So in some states, it's just one or two of the races. Like it might be the presidential race that's audited, but it might be insurance commissioner or something like that that's a lot farther down on the ballot. There's plenty of room for incorrect results to escape being caught in most of the country. Notably, in Florida, the election audit not only isn't strong enough, but it happens after the election is certified. And then in some places, the way the laws are written, even if an election audit discovers that the wrong candidate was declared the winner of a particular race, there are no laws in place to allow the results of the election to be changed as a result of that discovery. So there's a lot to be done to make our audits better. There are a number of different methods for auditing, some more robust than others. And we advocate for audits to be improved, and we also help people learn how to observe the audits and make recommendations for improvement. So what about recounts? Recounts are often done using the same computers that counted the ballots in the first place. They'll simply run the ballots through the same computer again. But if the computer isn't counting accurately, that's not much of a check, is it? And like with audits, only a subset of the votes are recounted in some situations. So in general, recounts only happen routinely in very close elections. How close that is varies from state to state. It's like always a percentage of difference in the votes between the first place and the second place candidate. If somebody wants a recount in an election that's not quite that close, typically they have to pay for it, and it's super expensive. Recounts are sometimes done when there are better options for checking the vote count, and that's actually kind of a new thing that's becoming available. One of our member organizations has developed a quicker method for checking the vote count that can make some recounts unnecessary, which is great because they take a long time and they're expensive. This method can not only be used by election offices, but also by political parties or candidates or even community groups to check the election results. And it can be done more quickly and accurately than what the cyber ninjas did in Arizona and without disrupting the official count.
So today we're going to give you a sense of what it means to get involved in the somewhat unusual work that we're doing here at Scrutineers and invite you to join with us in doing it. So most organizations, if you volunteer, what they'll ask you to do is call Congress, sign petitions, maybe write postcards or do phone banking, and all of that is wonderful. All of that is great. But our calls to action may initially be a little bit harder to understand, but are also really important and can be powerful and a little more engaging a lot of times as well.
A number of factors get in the way of our having the perfect elections we wish for. Unfairly drawn or gerrymandered districts act like a thumb on the scale, favoring those who are already in power. Dark money in politics does the same. A variety of laws and rules favor the two major political parties and wealthy candidates that represent the establishment. And marginalized communities and the individual voters within them are targeted for disenfranchisement, meaning having their votes taken away. If we zoom in to the running of elections, we see that election offices are underfunded. Voting equipment is not secure, like I've mentioned, and is often outdated. And again, there are insufficient checks and balances to ensure that procedures are performed correctly and vote counts are accurate.
And this year, especially, we face some pretty unique threats to fair and secure elections. And these threats include new voter suppression laws that are making it harder for folks, especially people of color, people on college campuses, and other marginalized communities to actually vote. And while groups around the country are working hard to make sure as many people as possible can get through all of those obstacles and actually vote, we're supporting that work by doing everything we can to make sure that every one of those votes is actually counted accurately. And there's also a lot of threats and attacks on election workers as well. A record number of election officials and workers have actually left their offices, left their jobs, which means this year we'll have a lot of inexperienced people running this very critical and complex election and running an election at all for the first time.
Both major parties are lying to the public about the trustworthiness of our elections. The Republican Party line is that elections are completely corrupt and should not be trusted unless their candidate wins. And they say this while installing election deniers in positions where they may actually corrupt the elections. The Democratic Party line is that our elections are completely safe and should be trusted no matter what. And this leads them to be significantly less vigilant than the real situation demands.
We face the risk of repeated election manipulation strategies that were beta tested in 2020 and since then, including the refusal to certify valid elections. And we're seeing increased misinformation and disinformation that's now been superpowered by AI, especially on social media.
And the last risk we want to mention now is increased vulnerability to hacking our election equipment due to the theft of the election software in Georgia and elsewhere. So in Georgia, as you may know, if you've been following Fulton County DA Fani Willis's RICO case against Trump and over a dozen others, MAGA operatives were allowed by election officials in Coffee County to copy the software used to run the elections for the entire state of Georgia. So it happened in this one small county, but it's the same software used throughout the state. And the voting system vendor, Dominion Voting Systems, says that they created a software patch a couple of years ago to address this security breach, but Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, has refused to install that patch into the software in time for this year's election, even though he's had it for a couple of years.
So all of this adds up to just magnanimously decreased voter confidence. And that's not an accident. The MAGA faction of the Republican Party has been intentionally dismantling the confidence that a lot of voters have or have had previously in our elections. And it's all part of, some people don't want some people to vote. And it's pushing others not to trust our elections. And it's laying the groundwork likely for election challenges again this year in 2024, potentially creating chaos and making the country more susceptible to violence like we saw on January 6th in 2021. So let's take a breath for a moment because that was a lot. And I know we kind of went through this quickly because we do want to honor people's time, but we can definitely dive deeper into any of these topics during the Q&A, but let's just take a moment with that.
I want to say, in my experience doing this work for almost 20 years, that the people who have ever had the luxury of having voter confidence in the US are mostly white people. It's white people who have newly had our eyes opened or been newly convinced not to trust elections. And I just want to acknowledge that people of color have had plenty of reasons to distrust elections always in the past.
Absolutely. Thank you. And the situation is not hopeless, but it is going to take a lot of people stepping up to have the impact that we need to have. So as an organization, Scrutineer's approach is to focus on increasing voter confidence by making our elections more trustworthy so that they actually deserve the public's trust rather than simply trying to appease people and reassure the public that, oh, everything's fine, everything's okay, just trust it and don't ask questions. But again, as we're working to make our elections fair, we're also focused on increasing the transparency of the entire electoral process so that anyone and everyone can see that they're fair, if that makes sense. So how do we do that? We have a few different ways. Because we have limited time today, we're going to focus on 5 of the ways that we work on this, but there are plenty more that we also focus on within our group. And for each one, we'll share at least one way that you can participate if you'd like to get involved. And no one can do everything. So if, as you listen to the next session, maybe think about 1 or 2 of these projects that really calls to you and you might want to get involved in. So number 1, one of the ways you can get involved is that we encourage people to become poll workers and to use that vantage point as a poll worker to notice any indications of problems with election security. We'll be offering an information session before the election to teach poll workers how to be election security watchdogs as well. So if that's something that you're interested in and you're already a poll worker or you want to be, let us know. Being a poll worker is a great way to be involved in your community and support the freedom to vote. And most poll workers work only on election day, though there are some positions available for early voting as well. And in most states, also being a poll worker also pays a stipend too. So many jurisdictions around the country still need more poll workers, and some need a lot more poll workers. And you can learn more about becoming a poll worker and how to apply at powerthepolls.org/scrutineers. We work with Power the Polls doing this work. So if you go to that page, it's powerthepolls.org/scrutineers. You'll be able to see where you can get involved and what the process is. And if you do become a poll worker and you have questions about the voting equipment or election security, we at Scrutineers can be a resource for you. We have a ton of that in our library, and you have access to us as well, and we can help you out with that. There are many other temporary jobs that might be available at your local election office too, so definitely call them and find out. And I think we need the next little piece. Uh-oh.
Needing the elections to be more secure. And
Emily, I think we lost you for a second, and we may not have heard that second thing that people can do.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked already about the elections needing to be more secure, and items number 2 and 3 are ways of providing public oversight that increases the transparency and therefore the security of our elections. The more we can see what goes on and share that with the public, the more reason the public will have to trust the election results. So both of these next projects involve creating documentation of what happens in the election. And if we do see election challenges, whether bogus ones or necessary ones, this documentation may become really essential evidence. So number 2 is observing the processing and counting of votes. Now, various organizations are recruiting people to be poll monitors or observers or watchers. They're called different things in different states. And Scrutineers is not trying to duplicate their work. Instead, we're asking folks to observe in the hours and days after voting ends. During this period is when determinations are made about which votes will be counted. For example, with provisional ballots or mail-in ballots, not all of them get counted, and those decisions are made in the hours and days following the end of voting. Reconciliation processes called canvassing are performed to make sure all votes are accounted for. And in some places, like we said, audits or recounts occur. Trained members of the public who are present and paying attention can both deter and detect errors and make sure processes are performed fairly and thoroughly. We teach people to do this work in a way that supports the election workers. So we're not there to catch them in mistakes, though we're there to help them by, if there is an oversight in what they're doing, noticing and pointing it out, but not in a kind of gotcha way. So we offer specific training sessions for those who want to do this kind of observation. And you can see our website, scrutineers.org, for the date of the next training. So if someone would put that into the chat, just https://scrutineers.org. And observing the post-election processes is something you could do once for a few hours, or you could do it every day for a couple of weeks, or somewhere in between. And especially in larger communities, election offices tend to be busy places, even in the late into the evening and on weekends. So you may be able to participate at times other than business hours if that works better for you. And in some communities, video cameras are set up so you might even be able to observe remotely from home. And Nyla, I think you had something you wanted to add at this point.
Yeah, I did actually. So when we're talking about observing the vote count, before coming to work at Scrutineers, I wasn't even aware that that was something that members of the general public could even do. And I really didn't know that it was possible. And I thought that if it was possible, certainly you had to be some type of special person or have some type of special clearance or certification to do it. And that's something I really love about Scrutineers and about the activities that we do. There is a very low barrier to entry, and it really is about just being educated on these things. I've gotten to tell so many people, hey, you can do this. You can watch this training that we have, and you can go out and do this whenever you want, whenever it's available. And it's really not that difficult either. And just knowing that there's something additional that I could do fairly easily, it felt very empowering to me, especially in moments where I was like, gosh, there's got to be something else. There has to be something else that I can do. So, but anyone who hasn't done it yet or is feeling that kind of helpless feeling in that kind of helpless place, just know that there's even more things like that that you can do that, like I said, very low barrier to entry, but have a really big impact. And it might be geeky and a little bit into the weeds, but it's very effective. So I encourage people to do it.
Thank you, Nyla. So the third project is one of our favorite entry-level ways to get involved, which is, it feels like it's so hard to explain, it's almost faster to do it than explain it. And here I'm talking about our poll tapes project. This involves traveling to polling places in your community on election night and using your smartphone to document the first glimpse that the public gets of the vote count. So here's how this works. Most votes are counted now by scanners. Ballots are fed in and scanned and counted by this particular kind of computer. And after voting ends, the poll workers print out a strip of paper from the scanner that looks like a cash register receipt. It has on it the vote totals counted by that scanner for every candidate in every race. And if there are ballot questions, the tape shows the number of yes votes and no votes. And in many states, it's required that those poll tapes be posted outside the polling place in public view on election night. So, for example, they might be taped to the inside of the window of the building facing out. And one of our member organizations, America Counts, has developed a mobile phone app specifically for taking and uploading videos of poll tapes. So we encourage people who live in states where they're posted publicly on election night to go after polls, about an hour or so after polls close, to their own polling place and as many others as they can get to, and take videos of the poll tapes. They upload the video to the America Counts site, and then volunteers, including some from Scrutineers, transcribe those tapes and compare the numbers on them to the numbers that are the official election results to make sure that the numbers haven't changed. And most of the time they haven't, but once in a while they have. And that's a really big deal. When that happens, it's the numbers on the poll tapes that are right, not the official results. So that's why it's important to capture that data and make it available to anyone who's doing any scrutineering. So that's another way you can get involved. America Counts calls this being an actual vote hero, and it's a simple thing to do. My mother did it in her 80s, and she's not the most tech-savvy person. So we'll put in the chat where you can find out if your state needs actual vote heroes. And if your state doesn't post poll tapes, this page will tell you how you can get access to those records. That's what the page looks like. So there are other ways to participate in this project, including helping transcribe the videos and comparing the data with the official election results, both of which can be done from home. And we will be offering another training about this project in October. We've got a recorded one available now, but there's going to be another live one. So be sure to join our email list to get notified when that's scheduled. So we now have 2 new links to put into the chat, and I will type them in here. And that's about as technical as we're going to get. So if those last 2 stressed you out, you can relax a bit now.
Thank you, Emily. And as we've mentioned before, in order for these projects to be successful, we need a lot of people to participate. Projects 4 and 5 are focused on growing the number of people that are aware and are participating in this work. So number 4 is teaming up with organizations large and small. You know how we've mentioned that great organizations all over the country are already doing important election work like registering voters and getting out the vote. So do you think that the people working to make sure as many folks as possible can successfully vote also care that those votes are counted accurately? We certainly do, and we hope that they do. And most of that volunteer work happens before the election, with some of it happening on election day as well. So some do ballot curing after the election, which is contacting voters whose mail or provisional ballots are missing information, so that they can provide the info needed for their votes to be counted, which is incredibly important. But most of those volunteers have no idea that there are projects like ours that need them after the election as well. Some of these folks are even at the polling places after the polls close and don't know how important it is to shoot the video of the poll tapes. So our After project, which stands for ACT for Transparent Elections, our After project is working to reach those volunteers through the organizations that they're already connected with. We have a basic hour-long training session that we offer via Zoom. We offer it every month. And we're looking for more organizations to invite us to present this training to their communities. And this is a way that we as a small national group can grow our work exponentially and make sure that this information gets out to as many people as possible. And it's likely the only way that we can grow it enough by November to truly make an actual difference. So you can help by telling groups that you're already connected with, your fraternity, your sorority, your places of worship, your place of work, other organizations you might participate in. You can help by telling those groups that you're connected with about this work and connecting them to us so that we can offer them this training and that they already have this in their toolbox for November. We don't only offer it to voting rights groups either. So we'd be happy to present it to your union, your Rotary Club, the people you play cards with. That's all fine. We've designed this to be as easy as possible on the groups hosting us. So we take care of everything. And you should be seeing, if you're not already seeing it, you should be seeing in a moment an image where you'll see a checklist of the things that we do to prepare for this training in the left column, and the things that our hosting orgs need to take care of on the right. So as you can see, it's very minimal effort on the group that is hosting us. And we are even happy to Zoom into a house party if you'd like to host one with your friends. That's yet another way that you can get involved, from home. If you can get 5 or 6 of your friends or family to just come to your house, we will do this training for them on Zoom. That's totally fine. So you can reach out to us through our website if you or an organization you're connected to would like to host us for a training for that purpose as well. And here's a link to the page where you can share with groups that might be interested. It's theafterproject.info, and Emily will make sure that gets into the chat. But you can share that with them as well. And the fifth way that you can get involved is by educating and mobilizing the public. You can use the connections you already have and help us reach more people. So you can follow us on social media and encourage others to do the same. You can you can comment, you can share our posts. We don't really have the budget for much publicity, so we really do count on making connections like this with you all to get the word out about our work and make sure that as many people have this information as possible. And so we really do count on folks like you to help us out with that. And we're Scrutineers US on most platforms. So that's Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever Twitter is now, Facebook, anywhere that you can find us, we're Scrutineers US. Or you can choose something from our shareables page and you can make your own posts. even on platforms that we're not using. We've put together a shareables page with some basic information and some other things. We've pretty much made the post for you, and you can just repost it and tag us, and people will have access to the information that way as well. And Emily will share the link to that page for you as well. So
Thanks.
to recap really quickly, go ahead.
Yeah, so the 5 projects we shared about are, to recap, let's see, number 1 is poll worker recruitment and education. 2 is observing the vote processing and counting. 3 is taking video of poll tapes. 4 is sharing our training with other organizations. And 5 is using social media to educate and mobilize the public. Increasing public oversight helps build voter confidence. Most of the ways that we mentioned that you can get involved with these projects don't require you to be registered to vote. So as we talked about before, we also have other projects like advocating for best practices in election administration. Sometimes 1 or 2 people pushing for small changes at the local level can decrease voter suppression. And we also love helping people find ways to use the skill sets they bring to help the cause.
So whether you're already a democracy advocate, whatever your situation, there is room for you in the Scrutineers community. You have something to offer, whatever your expertise is. We can probably find a way for you to put it to use here at Scrutineers with us. We have a private investigator among our members. We have people who develop software, some of which we do use in our projects. We have artists and writers and musicians and editors who help us with our work. So whatever your jam is, whatever your thing is, we can definitely find a way to put it to use. For example, actually, one of our newest members is a digital accessibility specialist, and she's helping us to make our website more accessible for people with a variety of disabilities. And so whatever your skills or interests are, we'd love to have for you to become a member of the Scrutineers community, and we will certainly find many, many things for you to get involved in. This is really hard work, and it's more effective and a lot more fun to do in community, so we hope that you will join us. And there's lots of benefits to being a Scrutineers member. The first benefit is access to our interactive community website. There you can get into conversations with other members. You can post your thoughts and respond to other people's posts. It works kind of similarly to Facebook, but honestly, it's a lot less overwhelming.
Nyla,
Yeah.
Could I just interrupt for a second? We actually
Sure.
have a slide for this part, and it's not marked.
Oh,
So sorry about that, Lynn.
that's okay.
There's actually a series of slides for the things that Nyla's talking about.
To show the website, yeah. So let me know when you're ready.
Okay, here we go.
Awesome, great. Glad y'all can see that now. But like I was saying, in our membership site, you'll be able to chat and talk with people. You'll be able to post links and make posts very similar to Facebook, but it's a lot easier to use. You can even send private messages as well, so it works very similarly. And then inside the community site is also our library of resources, including videos of past trainings, including the one about the poll tapes project that we talked about, and one about the different types of voting systems. Those are already in our library for you to watch and read. And it's a great place to learn more about election technology and security and ways to make a difference there. Members also have access to all of our members-only events and trainings. This is this one that we're doing right now is a public event. You don't have to be a member to see it, obviously. But we've got a ton more stuff that is just for members. So you can access our membership site via a mobile app on your phone as well, if you prefer. And of course, you'll have access to all of our opportunities to make a positive impact on democracy, like we mentioned earlier. Can
I interrupt again? Let's let Lynn catch up.
Sure. Are we good?
No, a couple more. I think there's 2 more. There we go.
There we go.
Let's see. Okay.
So we've also got a page on our community site that updates regularly when we have specific short-term volunteer needs. So we might need help finding podcasts to speak on, or help with an online research project, or creating a spreadsheet. So if you're someone who maybe needs a little bit more kind of a short-term thing that you can kind of see the results of kind of almost immediately, if that's more your thing, we got plenty of that to do too. And if you haven't already been convinced by my fabulous personality to join us, one more thing that I want to say about joining Scrutineers that I think a lot of people will find valuable is the sense of community. Sometimes when you're talking about these topics with friends or family, it can feel a little alienating because they don't really understand what you're talking about, or they might not understand why it's important. But you can trust that when you're at Scrutineers, you really are among like-minded individuals who really care about election security. We have members all over the country in, I think, 47 states and DC. And as spread out as we are, we really do want to make the world feel a little bit smaller and make people feel a little bit more supported as we do this work. So you don't need any special qualifications to be a member of Scrutineers. If you know absolutely nothing about elections but want to learn, this is a place for you. Even if you're not old enough to vote, or if you can't vote because of your immigration status or your justice system involvement status, please know that there is a place for you, and we value you here at Scrutineers, and we welcome you because regardless of whether or not you have the right to vote, elections absolutely impact all of us, and you have a right to know how they work. You deserve to participate and have a say in what happens to you, even if you're not able to cast a vote. So if you or someone you know has felt left out of electoral work in the past, we really do encourage you to bring that and bring others with you, because we want to be able to have those voices among us as scrutineers, especially as we go out to talk to others. We want to have as many voices with us as possible to make sure that all of us are represented. We have members who participate on our site almost daily, and some who come to our Zoom events but don't use the community site, and that's fine too. As a member, you can be as involved as you would like to be. You might focus on learning and watching training materials one month, and then the next month you might help us set up an online event with another group that you belong to. It really is a choose your own adventure kind of thing. So if you attend our observer training that we're preparing, we teach you how to observe the vote count, which would start, November 6th, the day after voting ends. You might want to do that as well. So like I said, it's a choose your own adventure. So how you choose to participate may also depend on where you live. Whether you're in a blue state, red state, purple state, there are a ton of ways for you to have an impact. And many of these activities that we mentioned can be done from home and can be done to support work in other states where you don't live as well. And joining Scrutineers is incredibly easy. You can do it right from our website, scrutineers.org. There is a one-time membership fee of $1.99. And that $1.99 is literally just to make sure that you're not a robot and that you are actually a real person. That being said, we never, ever, ever want money to be a barrier to participation. So if that $1.99 does present a barrier for you, that is absolutely 100% not a problem. Just reach out to us and we can totally get you joined as a member, and we can bypass that $1.99. We just have to make sure that you're a real person, and that's it. And you'll also see the option to support us with a monthly donation. If after everything we've said, you're like, yeah, that sounds great, I don't have time, but I really love this and I want to support it, we would absolutely be happy to accept a donation from you. It is certainly not required, but it is absolutely very much appreciated. And it helps us a lot, but it's completely up to you. The membership benefits are the same no matter which option you choose. So if you choose to join but not donate, or you choose to join and donate, it doesn't matter. You still get all of these benefits when you join as a member. And we all have communities and networks, and each voice to defend our democracy can make a difference. So I really do hope that you will join us.
Thank you, Nyla. I've had people say to me, I don't know what I could do that would make a difference because everybody where I live thinks like I do. And I've also had people say to me, I don't know what I could do to make a difference because I'm all alone where I live. Nobody thinks like I do. Those things can't both be true, right? So it's easy for us to convince ourselves that we can't make a difference, but I truly believe that we can and that we do. how you choose to participate might be different depending upon your environment, but there's always something.
Absolutely. And don't assume that because you live in a state where your political party is the majority, that means that your elections are fair or secure. There are cyber attacks that can happen. There can be insiders manipulating elections and results. There are even mistakes that impact the election outcomes, even if your party is the majority. So this work really is important everywhere. And we can't assume that any of our elections are completely safe. So we're about to move into our question and answer period as well. If you do have a question that you haven't already put into the chat, please do type it in the chat and just start your question with 3 capital Qs, Q, 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 so that we know that it is indeed a question and we can kind of scroll through and just kind of pluck those out. And we hope that those of you who are not already members of Scrutineers will join us. And become members of Scrutineers. And whether or not you become a member, we would love to invite you to join us for our next vote count observer training. It's going to...
So that date that you've got in front of you, I realize I made an editing error. So the date for the next training hasn't quite been set yet. It will probably be set in the next day or two. But people could just check our website at scrutineers.org for that information.
Awesome.
And it should be posted within the next day or two.
Okay, great. So our next vote count observer training will be posted soon, but we really, really, really would love for you all to join us. That is open to the public. You don't have to be a member to join. And it's just going to, again, put some more tools into your arsenal. So whether or not you become a member, we also invite you to sign up for our mailing list so that you can find out about all of the upcoming events we've mentioned. We've got a speaker series coming up. It's a fundraiser that's coming up next week. And it's an online speaker series called Truth and Consequences, Breaking Through Manipulation in a Landmark Election Year. We're going to have 3 speakers who are going to talk about various aspects of how the public is being manipulated in relation to the election and what you can do about it. And there's going to be some really juicy topics. So we hope that you'll join us. Information about that speaker series is on our website at scrutineers.org. And early bird tickets are on sale now. Our early bird tickets are starting at $25. Please, please, please do take advantage of the early bird price. You'll be sorry later if you don't. So definitely please join us for Truth and Consequences. It's going to be really great. And one final point before we move into Q&A, actually, I don't want to forget this. I want to encourage you to check your voter registration both right now and again about a month before the election, just to make sure that everything is current and nothing has changed without your permission. And if something has changed, that's crucial, like your address, make sure that whatever is on your voter registration reflects that and is accurate. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nyla, and thank you to Perry, Bobby, David, and the whole West Side Gazette crew for having Nyla and me here with you tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's been entertaining, educational. I had the fortunes of actually being involved with poll tapes, and thanks to our good friend Perry, who educated me and allowed me to do firsthand.
Great, thank you for doing that.
With that being said, I want to say to our listening and viewing audience that the West Side Gazette, we're going to create a poll tape posse, and see how many of these polling places we can hit. But I do want to put that out there and to ask if there's anybody interested to please give us a call. We're going to turn it into a party and show you how it's done. Yeah. So, yeah,
Bobby, share with us how you felt about it, because I know you had some apprehension.
I did. You know, I was one of the ones who said, well, I could just go vote and that's it. But after Perry assured me that it was much more to voting than just casting my ballots, and he actually took me to a place to show me how it's done. I thought first that I might go to jail because it was after hours and we were going on school property. and
Two black
nobody,
men.
two black men, nobody, but he assured me that it was okay and legal. And so I said, okay, Perry, let's go. And we did it. So I had another euphoric feeling, if you will, about my civic duty in terms of voting and make sure my vote counted. And those that we actually took the video of the poll tape as well. So I had my firsthand involvement with after the voting process. So,
And Bobby, I actually just want to acknowledge what you said right there about, feeling apprehension, especially going after hours, especially as Black folks. That's really why it's important to go in groups as well, because we know that even though we have the right to do this, just like anybody else, we know what goes on. And we know that sometimes even when we are doing things that we are perfectly well within our rights to do, people give us trouble about that. And so if I encourage any of this work, anyone to do it in groups, but especially Black folks to do it in groups, so that there's safety in numbers and you have someone there, even if they're not taking pictures of it, someone to carry the rules and regulations and say, hey, we do have the right to be here, things like that. Obviously that's not a 100%, but I highly recommend going in groups as well.
Yeah. And before we do this, before we attempt to do this, we will be in contact so we can get the actual guidelines to how you do it. So yeah, we don't want to go out there just be haphazardly doing something.
And from my experience with Broward County elections, and this is not, I've done it under Dr. Snipes, I did it under Pete Antonacci, and I did not get a chance to do it under Joe Scott. Yes, it is important that we get the poll tapes. It's also important that we get there after the polls close, but before everyone's gone. Because here's the issue. Posting poll tapes is a state law. It is required. And when they don't do it, it's a violation of that law. And we need to understand who's not posting. And as I've tried to assure each of those supervisors of elections, my point in bringing this to you is not to contend, but to make you aware where you're misstepping in the community and to let you know that we are watching. And so if you're there before, I've always found it good to ask them, where will you be posting the poll tapes? Because we've also found instances where, especially in schools, because in some places, schools are the places where voting takes place, they will post them outside the door of the gymnasium, but lock the front door. So then you don't have access. So again, it's why we need to be there early to make sure that they are posted where the public has access to.
Those are excellent points, Perry. And I just want to say it is state law in Florida, as I understand it, and that's not true in every state. So I know you've got viewers around the country, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And sometimes you can actually get.
Oh, Emily, you went mute.
Was I muted that whole time, or you heard me?
No, just where you said sometimes you can actually get, and then we lost you.
Thank you. So sometimes you can actually get a copy of the manual that poll workers use that lists all their duties, and find the page where it talks to them about posting poll tapes and show it to the poll workers, because they have so much that they need to remember, and especially if they're new, they just may not have absorbed that piece of information. So if you can get that, some states do the poll worker manual at a state level, and some do it at a county level. Often they're posted online. So you may be able to get that and kind of print out that page and bring it with you to show the poll workers.
Good information.
Yeah. Is there anything else for Q&A?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Nyla. You had a way of weaving into one of the questions that we had in terms of being allowed to work with scrutineers, being allowed to perhaps do the poll taking, if there was any involvement with the justice system, past involvement, that that would not prevent us from being involved with scrutineers. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have a ton of projects across a variety of things that you can do. And a lot of our activities are actually designed because we're focusing on election security itself and not get out the vote work. A lot of our activities are designed that anyone can participate. You know, we said before, we've got members who are as young as 14, so they can't vote anyway because they're too young. And we have, you know, we certainly encounter people and members who are disenfranchised from the vote for other reasons, you know, justice involvement, immigration status, things like that. So observing an election, you don't have to be a registered voter to do in most places. You can check the regulations state by state and county by county, but in most places you do not have to be a registered voter to do so. You don't have to be a registered voter to take pictures or video of poll tapes. You know, members of the general public can do that. So we really try to highlight a lot of those types of activities because we know that a lot of people have been disenfranchised from the vote. And we believe that all of those people, first of all, should have their voting rights reinstated. But as we work toward that, there are plenty of other things that they can do because even though they can't vote, these things are going to impact their lives regardless.
Okay. So I like that. Even though you can't vote, you still can be involved with voting. You know, and I think we need to really stress that. We spend so much time on the voting, but not the part that exclude others, where they can participate, not feel disenfranchised to a point. So I like that, and I want to stress that to our viewers and listeners, that everybody can be involved. You know, so if somebody has an angst against the system, here's your way to give back to make sure that your involvement counts. So,
Nala and Emily, I know in some of my conversations, especially among those who understand the significance of get out the vote, and not quite understanding this integrity and transparency part. They understand it in theory. Uh, what are some good ways that you have found to help them connect the dots, so to say? Because again, at times this can sound quite techy and nerdy, which is an immediate barrier. But we know that the ground zero for much of what we're talking about are in minority and rural communities. So how do we help? What are some ways you found to better express that part? Because I call it really, this is the return on your investment. If you're concentrated on getting people to the polls, then there is a part where we need to let you know how well your work has paid off, and that's more than waiting for the news to tell you. So, what are some of the ways you found that work?
I can start with that. I think exactly what you said, like really stressing to them that, you know, all of this work you're putting in to get out the vote, you want it to actually count. You don't want that, you don't want all that work you're doing to get people to the polls and to make it easier for them to get there. You don't want all of that work to be potentially undermined by getting people out there, having them stand in line and wait and do all of the things and jump through all these hoops they have to do just for those votes not to be counted correctly or not to be counted at all. And I think stressing that specifically to people who work in the arena of get out the vote work and really showing them that like these are things that can work in tandem and have to work in tandem, you know, and because no one wants their work to be wasted. And I think a lot of people, if you kind of phrase it like that, it helps them a bit to understand. I think also, especially for for communities of color and rural communities where getting to the polls is extremely difficult. I live in Elizabeth City, North Carolina right now, and it's a very rural community, and getting to the polling places is very spread out. So also talking to the voters directly and saying, hey, you're probably going to have to drive really, really far, which you shouldn't have to, but you probably are going to have to drive really far. Let's make that drive worth it. Let's make sure that as you're coming back home, you feel confident in the vote that you cast, and you feel confident that it's going to be counted correctly and accurately, because especially now, people have less money and less time than they've ever had. And those are two things that we don't want to waste. And gas is too high. It's just too high to not have the vote I cast count, So I think really just leveling with people in that way.
And I appreciate that response and also the question. And I want to just add that I think what is most effective is when organizations that folks are already connected with can do the education. And that's part of why we offer our training to other organizations. So let's say a worship community or your local chapter of the NAACP or something like that is interested in this work, they can invite us on to give our training for either poll tapes or observing the vote count, just the way that you hosted us here tonight, maybe on Zoom or something like that. We make it as easy as possible for them because we think they're going to be better at reaching their communities and knowing how to frame it and explain it in ways that will make sense to people and address their specific concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still time, even though the election is getting to be close, there's still time for us to get something onto the calendar and do it. We're ready to go.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be closing soon, but Emily, can you give us, I guess maybe a brief? I know that you also have some activities leading up to the election. Where we're needed. I know we don't have time, but could you just sort of tell people about that? Because I know just the other day, I think on the news in Miami, they announced that the machines were being tested.
So that's another thing that can be observed. It's called the logic and accuracy testing of the voting machines. And if people are interested in learning more about that, they can reach out to us through our website and we can help direct them. But that is something that makes sense to watch also. And some of the observation, we focus on observing after the election, but some of those observation tasks actually start before the election. During early voting, you could go in and observe the processing of absentee ballot requests and the sending out of those, and how the ballot envelopes are checked when they come back in. So yes, there are some things to do before the election. And one of the big things to do before the election is, and this was on our list, is help other people get the information about ways to get involved. Share about that as much as possible, whether it's, when you meet a friend for coffee, or whether you share it on social media or send an email to a friend or something like that. Talk to your neighbor, just to help spread the word about other ways to get involved to protect the election.
Yeah, because one of the biggest challenges I think with this work is that a lot of people don't know about it. I'd say that's about 60 to 70% of folks don't know about it at all. And then those other folks are kind of that camp that you were talking about, Perry, who are already involved in other areas of electoral work and are maybe overwhelmed, which is completely understandable, or who kind of have that laser focus and maybe don't understand why it's connected or why it matters. And I think for both of those groups of people, education is really the key, and making it as easy as possible. And like Emily said, it'll go down a lot easier coming from someone you already know or an organization that you're already a part of, and having us just kind of add to that toolbox, because a lot of people, don't know that there's all these things that you as a member of the public have the right to observe, because they don't publicize it, because they don't want people to come and look at it, and they bank on people not coming to look at it, or not knowing about it, or being too overwhelmed or too tired after work or whatever it is. Sometimes they schedule these things during impossible times that no one could possibly, it's kind of by design. But the more you know about it, the more you can plan around it, so that you can say, okay, they put this at 2:00 on a Tuesday, but I know ahead of time that they're going to do that. So I'm going to schedule that time, or I'm going to see if my friend who's available that time can go instead of me, because they're sneaky with it sometimes, especially in our communities. You know how it is. They're like, yeah, come observe it. It's at 6 a.m. on Wednesday. And it's like, nobody's doing that,
Yeah.
But so I feel like the more you know about it, the more you can plan around it.
Yeah. And I just want to chime in, Emily and Nyla, this has been awesome. But we do know that there have been laws put in place in various states when it comes to either helping or assisting people to the polls, giving them water and things of that nature. Is there something your organization does to just kind of help encourage and inform people of what they can and cannot do in some of these instances?
So there are enough other organizations doing that it's not one of the things that we focus on, but we do like people to know about the Election Protection Hotline, which is a national hotline of lawyers, law students, paralegals, where if people are having trouble getting registered to vote or voting, you can call them, you can text them, you can go to their website, and sometimes they will even send an attorney out to deal with the situation if it's a really serious one, but they can guide people through how to get the help they need. So if you would put this into the chat, that the phone number is 866-OUR-VOTE, and it's 866-OURVOTE.org. So that I would really recommend that people check that out and then keep that number handy when you go to vote. So let's see.
And the coalition that actually runs 866-OUR-VOTE, they keep data. They have a data project where when these calls come in and people are reporting election problems, so someone might say, hey, I'm registered to vote at this, this place. I'm here in time to vote. The polls are not closed, but they're not letting me in for some reason. They can call and report this, and they create a map so they can show hotspots of like, okay, there's a lot of this going on in Oklahoma. There's a lot of this happening in New York or Georgia, and they can start to see the trends. And then community organizations, we're part of the coalition, we have access to some of that data. So we can go and download some of it, and we can build some programming in around that in the future as well. So we definitely encourage people, if you are at your polling place, like Emily said, and something like that is happening, please do report it, because this is going into a database and people are cataloging this to see these trends.
And also responding in real time. So for example, if you're polling, if in your state polls open at 8 a.m. and you go to vote and the polling place isn't open yet, this is the number that you would want to call, and they can go to court right away and get the polling place opened. Or sometimes there will be problems that prevent people from voting at a particular polling location for a few hours during the day, and they've gone to court and made sure those polling places are kept open later into the night to make up for that. So it's a really important resource to know about. It wonderful national coalition that we're proud to be part of.
Awesome. And this can also be used during early voting, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Great.
Well, Perry, we're right near the bottom of the other hour. But this has been awesome. A lot of powerful, impactful information. And normally we just go around at the end, just allowing you guys to give your, closing arguments, should I say? closing thoughts as to, what you think our viewers and our listeners really need to know. So Emily, Nina, either one of you guys can go on. Terry, Bobby, you guys normally close out.
You can go ahead, Emily.
Well, what I just want to say is, again, to honor everything that people are doing to help get out the vote, to help people get registered, to help people get to the polls and vote. And we hope that you'll keep going after the election and work with us on making sure that the votes are counted accurately, standing up against any false accusations that happen after the election. And one thing that's important to know is it's a lot more important that we get the results right than that we get them fast. And if you see people screaming about online or wherever about why don't we know the answer yet? We need to take our time to get them right. It's not instantaneous. There's a lot that has to happen after the polls close before we know who won in all the races that are on the ballot. So let's be patient and work to get it right and support our election workers who are working very hard to bring us a fair election this year.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for having us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, I know a lot of people are hyper focused on the election, and that's fair. That's totally fair. They're hyper focused on the presidential election. There's a lot at stake for a lot of people, and that's totally understandable. What I will say is that especially work like ours gets pushed to the margins of electoral work because a lot of people are focused on getting out the vote. A lot of people are focused on getting certain candidates elected, and that's all fine. But what happens a lot of times is that close up to the election, our phone starts ringing. And then it's like, oh my gosh, and that's great. And we love that. That's fine. And then like around December, no more ringing. And it's really important in the years in between presidential elections and in the years in between congressional elections and those quiet times, that's when a lot of this groundwork is being laid. And that's the time to really put the pedal to the metal. So if you walk away from the polling place feeling like, gosh, I wish that I could have done more, I wish I could feel a little bit more confident in that, if that's how you often feel, we have a place for you. Our member organizations have a place for you. There are things and people that you can work with in those in-between quiet times that are going to impact the integrity of the election itself, so that when the next presidential or congressional or local or state election comes up, and that's really important too, you can observe all of these things for those small elections, the school board, the mayor, because those are the things that are going to affect you first. And I think that's what people need to understand. You have the right to observe, any elected office in your area. You can observe the count. And the process may be different for each thing sometimes, but you have the right to that information. So I want people to really think about, after the presidential elections are over, after kind of those big elections are over, that's the time to really be there. And we're one of few, a lot of the big organizations, they go away too. They go away and disappear until 4 years later too. But we're here all the time. So I really want to stress that. And if you need a political home in those in-between years, we invite you to be with us.
Awesome.
Emily, Nala, I can't thank you enough for taking this time. And for saying what I can't say in a way that I can't say, but you have my passion and we share that passion, I should say. Because it wasn't enough for me to know someone as great as Emily, I needed her to know some other and explain what is really impacting us. And I'm so thankful to have someone who knows our community and knows voting, and who has the ability to put it forward. And so I just can't say it enough. Thank you, and I look forward to all that you do. If you hear somebody That's my wife. I don't know what she's dealing with, but let me put this on mute and be through with this. But thank you. That is on the West Side Gazette. There's always something going on.
She's
But
dealing with something serious. It's important.
That might be voter related. I don't know.
That's right. That's important.
Yeah. But what do you got for us, dear brother?
If I can, I'll sum it up like this. Again, for those who may not be able to go to a ballot box and cast a ballot for whatever reason, if your involvement in the judicial system has led to that, here's an opportunity for you to be able to participate in when voting is not enough. You can go outside of that peripheral that perhaps you have been placed in and still lend a hand in making sure that this process works. You have an opportunity you have the right to scrutinize a system that you can't be involved in for whatever reason. And now you can. So I make a plea to all of our listeners and viewers. Here's an opportunity for us to get involved, to those who can't cast their ballots, but can actually make a difference to make sure that this system works. So please join us as we join with Emily and Nyla and the rest of the scrutineers to make sure that all our votes are counted and they are counted correctly. So thank you both so very much. Emily, from 2020, I remember that night, and I remember some folk calling you because of the show. I remember that as well. And Nyla, coming from Elizabeth City, North Carolina, y'all got some work to do there, and so do we. So
Yes, we do.
Let's join in and do it together. God bless you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
All right. And thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you.